Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Yeshiva Torah Chaim, Torah Emes, I would like to welcome everyone this evening to this pre-Shavuos gathering of inspiration. We are so honored to have with us tonight Rabbi Bentzion Shafier, the founder of the popular Shmooze.com, who is going to be addressing us very, very shortly. During this time period, we're counting. We're counting up towards Shavuos. And the Sefer HaChinuch tells us, why are we doing that? The reason why is to express our excitement towards Kabbalah Torah, the time period of Shavuos where we're going to re-accept the Torah. Now, I don't know about you people, but, for me, all I've been counting towards during this time has been, when is this thing going to be over already? We're all facing so many challenges. People have on their mind their health, their finances, just trying to stay afloat. And many of us may feel like, how am I supposed to go into Shavuos excited to really re-accept the Torah? A little while back, a friend of mine shared with me a letter. It was a letter written in September of 1945, written by the Klosenberger Rebbe. He was speaking on behalf of himself and the fellow Jews that were in a DP camp after the war, and he was asking Jews in America to be able to send over funds, to be able to send over the things that they needed to be able to help them. And in his letter, he was describing the experiences that were going on in that DP camp. And he writes as follows, and I quote from the letter: Jews have been wandering from place to place, searching for their loved ones. We're all lost and we're so confused. We're contained in camps, impoverished and ashamed. Rooms are too small to imagine. There are 20 people sleeping on one bed. Although we receive food from America, it barely amounts to a bean for each person. However, our greatest heartache is that 100 men have to share one tallis to daven. They're waiting for hours to put on the one pair of tefillin that we have here in the camp. They stand crammed together to glance from afar at a page of a siddur. And they're all asking, where are the Sfarim, Mishnayos, Chumashim, anything to be able to learn Torah from? When I read this letter, I was so amazed. How is it possible that they were able to think like that? Going through such challenging and difficult times, to have on your mind Torah, davening, tefillin? How is it possible? And I think the answer lies in a beautiful Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah tells us in Perek Vav, Mishnah Zayin, Gedola Torah Shehino Senes Chaim Lo says that the Torah is so great because it gives life to those who follow it. And he brings a proof to this from the famous pasuk in Mishlei, Eitz Chaim Hi Lamachazikin Ba. The Torah is compared to a tree of life to those who grab hold of it. And Rabbi Chaim Volozhin explains, what does this mean? He says, could you imagine if there's a raging river and somebody unfortunately falls into that river and he's heading down this powerful current and he has no way out? And all of a sudden he sees a tree, and the tree has a branch that's hanging over the river. When he gets to that point, he grabs hold of that branch with both of his hands. He clutches onto it as hard as possible to be able to save himself from this river. Rav Chaim Volozhin explains that this world that we live in is that river. That current that's taking us down are the challenges and the difficulties that we're experiencing in the world that we live in. However, he says the Torah and the mitzvot, those are the branch. Those are the branch that we have to grab onto with both of our hands very tightly in order to be able to save us and to be able to get us through these trying times. And I think that's exactly what the Jews in the DP camp were feeling. They knew that they were going through difficult times. They felt how challenging it really was. However, they understood that the way to get through those challenges is by grabbing hold of Hashem's Torah, taking hold of those mitzvot, and that's what's going to get them through that difficult situation. And Emir Hashem, this year, we are going to experience the most uplifting Shavuos that we have ever had. We're going to take our inspiration that we've all had through these trying times as we re-accept the Torah, as we reconnect with Hashem's mitzvot, because we realize that that, and only that, is what is going to get us through these trying times. And that is why we're gathered here tonight, to be inspired, to get that inspiration towards Kabbalah Torah, to be able to feel it, to be able to be excited towards Kabbalah Torah. And it's a great honor and a privilege that we have with us this evening Rabbi Bentzion Shafier, someone who is known across the globe for his Hashkafa talks, inspiring tens of thousands of people to tackle real-life issues through a practical and relevant Torah perspective. And after tonight, I'm sure that each and every single one of you are going to want to hear even more and more of Rabbi Shafier's shmuzim and his unbelievable talks, which you can access via the shmuz.com, the Shmuz app, and as well the Shmuz podcast. And without further ado, we ask Rabbi Bentzion Shafier to share with us some divrei chizuk as we approach Kabbalah Torah.
Thank you, Rabbi Moskowitz. Thank you. I greatly appreciate warm words of introduction, and I appreciate your words, and I thank the yeshiva for inviting me. What I'd like to share with you this evening is a perspective on life. It's one of those big picture perspectives that we often miss, that we rarely sort of take into consideration, but I think is essential for understanding not just the times that we're living in, but life in general. And to share with you that perspective, let me begin with the Gemara. The Gemara tells us that Rabbi Elazar bar Padas, he was an Amora, one of the great rabbis of the Gemara, and he was a tremendous tzaddik. He was known as Mara d'Eretz Yisrael, the Torah teacher of Israel at the time, the Gadol Hador. But despite the fact that he was a great tzaddik, and despite the fact that he was a tremendous Eved Hashem, he lived a very, very difficult life. The Chikile Milsa Tuva, the Gemara's description, austere, bitter. He suffered poverty, illness, disease. The Gemara gives us a description of a day in the life of Rabbi Elazar bar Padas. One day he went for medical procedure, and when he comes back home, he finds a bare cupboard. But a bare cupboard means nothing to eat. He reaches inside and finds a clove of garlic. That was the only thing there. He bites into the clove of garlic and passes out from malnourishment. The word quickly spreads in Yerushalayim. The great Rabbi Elazar bar Padas is unconscious. Osi l'shuli be'Rabbanan, and the rabbis come visit to see what's happening with him. And when they walk in, they see him unconscious, and this is what they witness. First he begins crying, then he begins laughing, then a beam of light comes out of his head. Ki is a'er, when he awoke, they said, "My hi, what's the meaning of this? The crying, the laughing, the beam of light?" And says Rabbi Elazar bar Padas, at that moment, Yashav imi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem himself came to visit. And I said to Hashem, Ad Masai et star by Alma Hashem, until when will I suffer? When will my suffering end? And Hashem said to him, Elazar b'ni, Elazar my son, Nichlach ta'apech la'alma meresha, is it good for you? Would you like me to start the world from its moment of creation? Efshed mishas b'shastim is only maybe you'll be born into a time of sustenance. Rabbi Elazar bar Padas said, I said to Hashem, Kulei efshe, you're going to turn the world back to its moment of creation, and maybe I'll be born into a time of sustenance? The Marsha, one of the commentaries on his Gemara, explains to us that Rabbi Elazar bar Padas was being offered something unique. Do you think your life is too difficult? Do you think it's too hard to bear? Would you like me to find you another life, put you into a different generation, into a different body, and you could start over? And apparently, Rabbi Elazar bar Padas wasn't sure. His life was so difficult that he didn't really know if he could continue or not. He said to Hashem, did I live half of my life? If I pass the halfway mark, I think I can continue. If not, I don't know. Hashem said, yes, you passed the halfway mark. Im kein lo be'ina. And so Rabbi Elazar bar Padas said, I don't wish you to put me into a different life. Put me back into the life that I had been leading. At which point Hashem says to him, Elazar, your reward is 13 rivers. Your reward is an estate that's so wide and so vast that there are 13 rivers running through it. Again, the Maharsha, one of the commentaries, explains to us what that means. His reward is in the world to come. In the world to come, there are no estates, there are no rivers. It's a parable. Imagine a man in our world who's so wealthy that he owns tracts and tracts of land. He owns an entire state with 13 rivers running through it. And that's a parable to this man's world to come. And no sooner did Hashem say that to Rabbi Elazar bar Badas, and then Rabbi Elazar bar Badas said, Kulei hai v'sulo. That's all? Just 13 rivers? And then Hashem said back, how could I take from others? Says Rabbi Elazar bar Badas, don't take from others, take those portions of those who haven't earned it. Again, the Maharsha helps us by explaining what's going on. The Maharsha explains that when Hashem creates each Jew, Hashem creates a portion for that person in the world to come. If they claim it, it's theirs. If not, it's left unclaimed. And says Rabbi Elazar bar Badas, don't give me anything that was earned. Don't take something that someone else is entitled to. Those portions of those people who didn't earn it, let me gain those. Hashem said, Giri bach, touche. Hashem touched him on the forehead. The beam of light came out of his head. And that is the way the Gemara explains the event. And besides the numerous questions we might have on this Gemara, let me open up with one very obvious question. We're dealing with a great man. We're dealing with a tzaddik. We're dealing with a man who spends every moment of his life serving his Creator and serving his people. And he's suffering. But he's not suffering lightly. He's suffering so acutely that the very first thing he says to Hashem is, Ad masai etzar. Hashem, when will my suffering end? He was an Amora, one of the rabbis of Gemara. He had many, many questions he could have asked. Many, many issues. Yet this was so prominent, so right there, that the very first thing he said to Hashem is, when will my suffering end? So here's the question. If Hashem is more kindly, more loving, more giving than anyone we could ever begin to imagine, and here this great tzaddik is suffering so acutely, why didn't Hashem just say, okay, Elazar, you're a good man. You've done well. I'll take over from here on in. But that's not what Hashem says. Hashem says this rather perplexing expression. Do you want me to turn back the world to its moment of creation, find you a different generation in which maybe you'll have sustenance? If I were a Elazar bar Badas, I would say, don't turn back the world to its moment of creation. How about a cup of coffee and a tuna fish sandwich? He's not asking for luxuries. He's not asking for wealth. He's asking for basic parnasa. Why not Hashem just say, okay, I'll take over from here on in? And I'd like to see if we could better understand what in fact this Gemara shares with us, and in fact the perspective that I believe this Gemara shares with us on life. And to do that, I think we need to understand the answer to this question. And to answer this question, let me begin with a mashal, a parable. Imagine there's an actor, a famous actor, and he gets a call from his agent. Listen, Jack, we got this great script. It's a guaranteed Oscar. I'm going to send it by tomorrow. You're going to sign it up. We're going to do it. And the next day, the actor reads through the script. Agent calls. Jack, we're going to do it, guy, right? Nope. What is it, Jack? The cash, we'll get more cash. I'm not doing it. Well, what is it? The other actors will change it. I'm not doing it. Well, why? What's the problem? The problem. Look at the part. The part you have me playing as a loser, a down and out. Yeah, but Jack, that's just the part. You're going to do it, guy, right? I can't stand the embarrassment. The whole world seeing me as a loser, a luckless down and out. He hangs up the phone. Now, that conversation never happened, because any actor, as well as anyone going to the theater, understands the actor has a role to play. The actor is given a script. If the actor's script is to be the most successful human being on the planet, and he plays his part poorly, the critics will rip him to shreds. If his part to play is an idiot savant, but he plays it well, he'll win accolades, he'll win awards. The actor is judged on one criteria. This is your part to play. How well did you play your part? And I believe that's an apt parable for life. Before we were born, Hashem said, you will be born into this generation. You'll be put into this family, in this birth order, with this amount of talent, these amount of abilities. This is the exact stage setting. You'll be put into this role. This is your life. Go lead it. Become that great person you could be. Ford those streams. Climb those mountains. But each of us were given a different role, and each of us were given different talents and abilities. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that there are great inequalities, great differences in talents and abilities and circumstances that human beings are put into. If you look around a small room, a classroom, you'll see vast differences in talents, in abilities, and natural gifts. And I'd like to share with you something profound. If Hashem created us for our station in this world, and if this world were the end-all and be-all, there are many, many questions you should ask on Hashem, one of which is, it's not fair. As a matter of fact, I call it the mantra of the 8th grade girl. I have 4 daughters, and maybe you know this mantra. The mantra of the 8th grade girl is, it's not fair. She has so many friends, and she has such pretty clothes, and her parents are so nice, it's just not fair. And I'd like to share with you, she's 100% correct. There are vast differences in talents, abilities, and circumstances. You ever notice some people are just socially gifted? They know exactly what to say to whom and how. And some people are social klutzes. But here's the point. None of us get to choose. I don't get to choose. You don't get to choose. No one I know woke up in the morning and said, Hashem, I think you should make me 6'4", big and strong. No, Hashem, make me 4'6", kind of crumpled over. Hashem, give me a 180 IQ, brilliant and swift. No, Hashem, give me an 80 IQ, kind of daft and dumb. We don't get to choose. And as we don't get to choose our physical setting, we don't get to choose our intelligence, we also don't get to choose much of our temperament, nature, and dispositions. Daniel Goleman writes in the book Emotional Intelligence that at 22 months of age, they can determine the nature of the child, extroverted or introverted, bold or timid, because hardwired at birth into the child is much of his nature, much of his inclinations, much of his disposition. Now, can you go further? Yes. Can you expand? Yes. But you'll quickly notice that there are vast differences in intelligence, in charisma, in talents, in abilities, and it really is not fair. But once you understand that we are but actors on the stage of life, I was given a role to play, you were given a role to play, and when I'm done my job here, they don't ask me, why didn't I become you? And they sure don't ask you, why didn't you become me? Why didn't you become the Chavetz Chaim? Why didn't you become some great tzaddik? We're each given different talents, different strengths, different abilities, and each of us are asked the most demanding question, how much of you did you become? 80%? 60%? 40%? In fact, they say in the name of the Vilna Gaon that the most painful moment in a person's life is not that fatal car crash, not when he hears the shattering of glass and the twisting of metal, not even when I recognize that the tzala guy is pulling that sheet over my body, and not even when I attend my own funeral and I hear all the people in my life say those things that they'll say about me. They say in the name of the Gra that the most painful moment in a person's life is when they put the casket into the ground and they cover it with a layer of dirt and I separate. I leave behind this earth, I leave behind my body, I stand in front of the heavenly tribunal and they hold up this picture of this great man, this accomplished human being. And they say to me, why don't you become that? Me, little me, you want me to be that Talmid Chacham, that tzaddik? What do you want from me? And they say in the name of the Gra, the most painful words you'll ever hear in your life are the words, that is you. That is you had you lived up to your potential. That is you had you actualized what you could have been. That is you had you become that which you were destined to be. But you see, the picture is a picture of me. I'm not asked to be you. None of us asked to be people who lived hundreds of years ago. Each of us are given talents and abilities. Each of us are given a role to play. And each of us are asked one single question: how well did you play your part? And I believe that this is a fundamental to understanding life. And once you understand this, you understand that people are given vastly different temperaments and dispositions. And yes, it's true that you can grow. And yes, it's true that that's the purpose of life. But at the end of the day, you'll see that people have different life settings and different situations in life. And I have a little mushal, if you'd like to understand this in very clear terms. There was a novel written many years ago about a football player. The football player was a quarterback and he's getting in shape for the Super Bowl Sunday, which was 3 weeks forward. And to get in shape, he's riding his bike on a country road. And at the end of this country road is a long, winding tunnel. Anyway, he enters the tunnel this way. Unbeknownst to him, there's a car coming the other way. As the story goes, the angel of death on the job that day was new to the job. Angel of death sees the football player coming this way, sees the car coming this way. Angel of death says, why wait for the blood, the mess? Instead of waiting for the actual collision, the angel of death takes the football player out of his body, brings him up to heaven, and they bury his body, and everything's good to go. Except one little problem. The angel of death made a mistake. You see, any normal person would have crashed, deserves to be up there, but he was an athlete with keen instincts. The last moment he would have veered off, would not have been hit by the car. He deserves to be alive. The problem is his body's in the ground. What do they do now? A whole tumult up in heaven. What do? They decide to do the only thing they can do. They find someone whose time, in fact, is up, someone as close in age to the football player as possible. And the cute part of the story is that the football player finds himself put into the body of this rich tycoon. He opens his eyes and he sees this palatial manor, the butlers and the maids. And then he feels a flab on this body of this pampered tycoon. And then he realizes he only has 3 weeks to Super Bowl Sunday. So the cute part of the story is he has the butlers and the maids on the front lawns running football drills as he tries to get his arm in shape for the big game. Now, while that's a cute story, there's a punchline. That exact experience happened to you and to me. Before I was put into this body, I, the one who thinks, I, the one who feels, I, the one who's speaking to you, I was under Hashem's throne of glory, and Hashem said, this is the generation into which you shall be born, into this birth order, into this family, with an older nagging sister, a younger wimpy brother, because this is the ideal stage setting for you to reach your potential, for you to become the great person that you can become. And I believe that's the answer to Rabbi Elazar bar Padas. You see, great wealth is a life test. When you're wealthy, but I mean phenomenally wealthy, when you can buy and sell the city, there's a sense of independence, of I don't need anyone, I don't need my kids, I don't need my wife, I don't need God, I could buy the world. That is a life test. And as great wealth is a life test, so too is poverty. When you don't know how you're going to pay your mortgage, and the word foreclosure is being used again and again and again, and finally you scrape together enough money to pay that month's mortgage, and that night you hit a parked car. You look left, you look right, no one sees. Do you leave your phone number or do you not? As great wealth is a life test, so too is poverty. And I believe that's exactly what Hashem was saying to Rabbi Elazar bar Padas. It's not by accident that you were born into this generation. It's not like I ran out of cash in your age. Handcrafted for you. Custom designed. This is the ideal stage setting for you. And says Hashem to Rabbi Elazar bar Padas, do you want me to find you a different generation? A different life circumstance that doesn't include poverty, but might still allow you to reach your potential? Says Hashem, Efshar, maybe I can, and maybe I can't, because this one has been handcrafted for you. And this understanding allows us to understand why a merciful, kindly God would create such disparities amongst people. Because all of it doesn't matter. When I'm done my job here, they don't ask me how popular I was, how pretty I was, how much money I had. They ask me one single question. This was your role to play. How well did you play it? And this understanding is fundamental to understanding life. And you would assume that most intelligent people would get this. But I'd like to share with you it's not so simple. Many very, very educated, very, very well-read people don't have a clue to this concept. Let me share with you an example. Alan Dershowitz is a good friend of the Jews. Alan Dershowitz is a Jewish fellow himself. And Alan Dershowitz has written many books. One of his books is called The Vanishing American Jew. And there's a particular part in that book that's well worth not reading. In his book, he describes that he's a college professor, actually Harvard Law. And in one of the courses he was teaching dealt with the big picture issues of life. And in a certain part of the course, there was a survey. They were surveying the different religions, Judaism, Buddhism, Catholicism, basically looking at each religion and determining what they did for mankind. Were they beneficial? Were they detrimental? Okay. At a certain point, one of the students raises his hand and says, Professor, religion is a way of studying God, of worshiping God. If we're rating the world's religions, shouldn't we rate God? So he asked the student what he meant. The student explained, and he agreed. So they decided to rate God. How did God do at this thing called creation? Does God get an A, a B, a C, a D? How does God rate at this thing called the world we live in? Okay, so now, before I spoil the fun and tell you what grade God got on the final, let me share with you the world from Alan Dershowitz's perspective. On the one hand, there's a lot of beauty in this world. There's sunrises, sunset, there's poetry, there's flowers, love, a lot of nice parts to the world. On the other hand, there's some really rough spots. There's pain, poverty, illness, disease, there are orphans, there are widows, On balance, God rates a B minus. Not an F, certainly not an A plus. Mediocre, a B minus. That's how God rates at this thing called creation. Okay, now let's imagine for a minute I had the opportunity to rate our learned professor. If I were to give him a grade for that little study, I would not give him an A. I wouldn't give him a B. I would not give him a C. I would give him a D for dumb. And I'll explain to you why. Imagine I were to pick up this pen. And imagine I would say to you, you know, this is a lousy toothpick. I mean, come on. Whoever invented this toothpick did a lousy job. I mean, who needs this whole thing over here and the clicker thing? And worse than that, every time I get it back in my molars, I get this blue inky thing. I mean, whoever designed this toothpick did a lousy job. Now, that would be an example of fallacious thinking. Because before you rate the manufacturer, you have to know what they intended that object to do. As a writing instrument, it might be well crafted. As a toothpick, it might be lousy. But before you rate Bic, you have to know what they crafted that item to be. And I say it's the same thing with Hashem. And before you rate the creator of the heavens and earth, you better have a very clear understanding as to why Hashem made the world, why Hashem made man, and why Hashem put man into this world. And if you try to rate God before you have a very clear understanding of that question, you're going to come up with some pretty silly ideas. So I'd like to share with you a mushal. If you would like to know the answer to the biggest question in life, why did Hashem create us? What's life about? Why did Hashem put us on this planet? Let me share with you a mushal. Imagine you're invited to a health club. Beautiful, exclusive health club. You've never been there, but you know the basic layout. On the right side is the gym, and the left side is a spa. The gym has all the equipment you need to work out, the Nautilus, the free weights, everything you need to get in shape. And the other side, the spa, has everything you need to sort of relax. The steam room, the sauna. Okay, you decide it's been a very stressful week. You're heading right to the spa. But you've never been there before, so instead of turning left, you turn right, and you find yourself in this room with all these red-faced people grunting and sweating, and all this equipment. Whoever designed this spa did a lousy job. The Mesilas Yesharim, one of the greatest works of Musar in the past 500 years, explains to us that when Hashem created the world, there are two worlds. There's this world and the world to come, each with its plan, each with its purpose. This world is the gym. We were put here to grow, to accomplish, to change the essence of me. When I'm done my job here, I go to the spa, that's the world to come, where I enjoy the fruits of my labor. But each world with its plan, each world with its purpose. This world is the gym. We were put here to grow, to accomplish. The world to come is a place where we enjoy that which we've done. When you understand that there are two worlds, life itself makes sense. When you understand that there are two worlds, you understand that you're going to be challenged with many situations in life that do not benefit you in this world whatsoever. But they challenge you. Do you rise, do you transcend, or do you crumble? But there's no sitting on the sidelines. Many, many situations that you will be confronted with in life have been custom designed, handcrafted to challenge the essence of you. And when you understand that this is the gym, when you're working out, it's enjoyable, but it's very focused, and there's certainly some pain that comes with it. It's with a plan, it's with a reason, and all of it has one single focus: to change the essence of me, to grow, to accomplish. And when I'm done my job in this gym for eternity, I enjoy whatever I accomplished. I enjoy Hashem's proximity based on what I did. This is the gym, and the world to come is the spa. And when you understand that, life itself makes sense. But if you don't understand that, then I say very little in the world makes sense, and you will have many, many questions. Many, many questions that have no answer. Not that you don't know the answer, that have no answer. And I'll share with you just a few of them. Have you ever suffered a headache? A headache. How about a migraine, right? A migraine. Here's a question. Why would a loving, kindly God create pain? And don't tell me avoidance pain. Avoidance pain is processed in the spine. When you touch the hot pot, if the transference had to go all the way to the thalamus and all the way back, your hand would burn. When you step on that nail, instantly the transference is in the spine, the message is sent back to move your foot. The debilitating pain is processed in the brain, and it does man no good. I walked the man up 3 steps on Yom Kippur. I think he suffered more pain in those 3 steps than I suffered in my year. Debilitating arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis in every joint of his body, and just Gehenna. Why would a loving, kindly God create a pain delivery system that's so sophisticated? When you smash your elbow, it hurts. When you smash your shin, it hurts. When you have a stomach ache, it hurts. When you have a headache, it hurts. When your tooth is throbbing, it hurts. And when your spleen is bothering, it hurts. But each of those pains are distinct. Each one is different variations, different hues. You could write poetry about the different nuances and flavors of pain. Why would a loving, kindly God create this pain delivery system just so I could say, ouch? And if that question doesn't quite grab you, here's another one. The Creator, who's so incredibly capable, created an immune system in man that's stupefying in its sophistication, ironclad, with gaping holes in it, and disease states carefully crafted to penetrate those very holes. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, there's something called COVID-19, and you can't even see the pathogen. I don't own a microscope strong enough to even see it. And yet, weeks and weeks of torture if you survive. Why would a kindly God do that? And when you understand that many situations in life are challenges, many situations are challenges to see how we respond, to allow us to change, and to allow us to shape the essence of me, you begin to understand life. And then you begin to understand there's a world to come, and life itself makes sense. I may not know the answer to every situation and every question, but I have a perspective, I have a way of understanding, and I know that the way Hashem runs the world is to give us challenges, put us in situations, because this is the gym and the world to come is the spa. I get a chance to speak in many communities, and every once in a while I get reactions that are a bit eye-opening. I was speaking in a certain out-of-town community once, and I said what I call the death shmooze. The death shmooze is where I describe death, but not in theoretical terms, as in my death, your death. What's it like? What's it really like? Okay, anyway, I did the whole 45 minutes of the death shmooze, and a lot of people had questions after. A lot of people came over, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed an older couple kind of hovering on the side. When everyone was finished, the older couple came by, and the woman said, "Rabbi, I loved the lecture." I said, "Oh, thank you." Husband followed suit. "Rabbi, I loved the lecture, but..." Now, I've been around the block often enough to know that when you hear the words, "Rabbi, I loved the lecture, but..." this is going somewhere. And so I waited to see where this was going. "Rabbi, I loved the lecture, but according to what you just said, I've wasted my entire life." So I asked him what he meant, and he explained to me. Now, folks, I'd like to share with you. When you're on this side of the lectern, and an 80-year-old man is on the other side saying that according to what you've just said, he's wasted his entire life, and you know that he might be correct, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. So I stopped saying that shmooze in public. It's on the shmooze.com, shmooze23, the shmooze podcast, the shmooze app. You won't hear me say it in public anymore. But I want to share with you the highlights of that shmooze because I think it's relevant to our point. Here we go. Rabbi Salanta says we make a fundamental mistake about death. Ask somebody to describe death. "Oh, I don't know, black, darkness, at rest. Harvey was a good man. He's in his final resting place. Rest in peace, Harvey." Explains Rabbi Salanta, if you'd like to understand death, it's very simple. Imagine I walk into the room, I take off my coat, hang it up, and I enter the room. Explains Rabbi Salanta, that is death. This part, the body, is the coat. This part's put in the ground, and I separate. But it's me. With my thoughts, my memories, I the one inside, I the one who tells the arms and legs to move, I, the guy inside, separate. My body is the housing. This is the coat. This part's put in the ground, I separate, and for eternity I enjoy what I made myself into. But it's me, not my distant cousin, not my alter ego, not some splintered down version of me, my neshama. My neshama will float in heaven over there. Me. With all of my thoughts, all of my memories, the same I who am speaking to you, and I, the occupant of this body. But that's not normally the way we think about death. We think about death as going to sleep, as in blackness, as in darkness, as in who can know. But I'd like to share with you that it's the exact antithesis of what death is. Death isn't going to sleep. It's a brilliant awakening. I leave the body and whoosh, every memory of my existence comes back to me. Every moment with acuity, with sharpness, with clarity, and I am completely, totally alert, aware, and awake. And in that state, I live forever. The problem, though, is that these concepts are distant and they're hard to feel. So I'd like to share with you a mashal, a parable, to help make this a little bit closer to home. First, a little social etiquette question. Does anyone know how much time you have from the time you receive the text till you respond before you're considered rude? Right? Meaning from the time you get the text until you respond, how much time can elapse before you're considered like a bore, amoritz, a rude person? So I don't know the exact sliver of time. What do you mean you're in the shower? Yeah, 10 minutes ago I text you. All right, a very small sliver of time. Okay. In any case, you've brought up your child to be a very socially aware person. And he really is a very polite fellow. And he understands social etiquette beautifully. Not the best driver, but very, very polite. Anyway, one day you're driving, and he is a new driver. And you do notice that he's going a little bit quicker than you really feel comfortable. You don't say anything. I don't want to be like one of these heavy dads, like one of these boring, So you don't say anything, but you do notice the speedometer is climbing past 70, 75, 80. You're about to say something when he gets a text. Now, I did mention to you that he's very polite, right? Not the best driver, but very polite. So, of course, when he gets a text, he texts back. Text in, text back, text in, text back. Suddenly, pow! Crash. Shattered glass. Crash in the middle. You're out cold. 3 days later, you open your eyes, you look up, and you see the doctor looking down at you, and the doctor says, sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you'll never move another muscle in your body again. And you feel your arms. Hey, they're stuck. My chest, my head. Hey, help, I'm stuck in here. Imagine it's you. Imagine you're locked into your body. You can't move your arms, can't move your legs, can't move your head, can't move your chest. And imagine that your friends come to visit, and your friends say those things that friends say when they don't know what to say. Oh, you look so terrible. Thanks a lot. Not bad enough I gotta be stuck in here. You gotta tell me how bad I look? Okay. Imagine it's you locked into your body. Here's the question. Are you alive? Are you alive? So if you're not quite sure whether you're alive in that point or not, I'll share with you an interesting observation. The editor of Elle magazine in France was involved in just such a car crash. He woke up in the hospital in what's known as locked-in syndrome, locked into his body, could not move his arms, couldn't move his legs, couldn't move his head or his chest. And there's a book written about that state. And the book is called The Butterfly and the Diving Bell. And that book describes his highs and his lows. And it describes the nurses, some were kind and sweet, some were okay when he called Attila the Hun. He describes when his children came in to visit, he was so joyful to see them, yet so sorrowful that he couldn't reach out and touch them. Interestingly enough, this man could move one muscle. He could blink his left eye. A speech pathologist devised a method for him to communicate. She put the alphabet on a card and she would move her finger down the card. When she got to a letter that he would want to signal, he would blink his eye. Hence, he was able to communicate his thoughts, his feelings to the world. So here's the question. That man in that hospital bed, was he alive or not? So if you're not quite sure, I'll share with you one final observation. That book, which became a bestseller in France, was translated into English, was made into a movie, was written by that man in that state. In the mornings, he would compose the sentences and the paragraphs in his mind. In the afternoon, his secretary would stand at the foot of his bed, taking dictation, letter by painstaking letter, because he died in that state. And if you'd like to read a chronicle of a man vibrantly alive, yet his body effectively dead, read the book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And after a while, you begin to get it. I'm not the body. The body is the housing. If my arms were paralyzed, I would still be alive. If my legs were paralyzed, I would still be alive. And even after my body's put in the ground, I live on. And I have one more step. These concepts used to be difficult to relate to. They used to be very foreign and very hard to feel. In our day and age, they're very, very accessible and almost palpable. And I'll explain to you why. In 1979, Raymond Moody caused a stir in scientific circles and the scientific community. He wrote a book called Life After Life, and he coined a phrase called near-death experience. He interviewed hundreds of patients who were involved in what we now know as near-death experiences. That means they were dead, clinically dead for 4 to 6 minutes. And if they were resuscitated within that time period, about 33% of them reported certain occurrences. And it was an eerie commonality that almost all the cases shared. And they described popping out of the body, hovering from above, and witnessing and hearing conversations. Now here's the artist part. The artist part is that they would recall vividly conversations that were held when they were dead. They would know things they couldn't possibly know. In any case, when he published this book about hundreds and hundreds of such reported cases, he caused a revolution in the scientific community because it made no sense. It can't be. The body's dead, the person's dead. What do you mean the person lives on? Since that time, thousands and thousands of cases have been reported, have been proven, have been corroborated, and it's now an accepted medical fact. We don't understand what it means, we don't know, but somehow the person lives on after the body's dead. Okay. Lancet magazine, which is a prestigious British medical journal, ran a summary survey of all of the studies dealing with near-death experiences. This was to be the study of all the studies, and they were supposed to reach some conclusions and observations about near-death experiences in general. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details of the study, but I want to share with you one case that they report. Now, a little warning ahead of time, there's some blood in this story. It's not very gory, but just a heads up. In any case, the story they tell is as follows. A 36-year-old woman suffered an aneurysm in the brain. It means bleeding in the brain. Normally, the procedure calls for the surgeon to go in, open her skull, cauterize the area. It means sear the tissue, stop the bleeding, close it back up, and usually it's not fatal, not even that dangerous per se. In any case, the surgeon examined the MRIs, examined the x-rays, and the surgeon called her in and said, "Madam, if we go in your situation, the bleeding is so deep that I'm going to cause so much residual bleeding, you'll bleed to death. There's nothing I can do for you." Effectively, the surgeon was sending her home to die. Another doctor on the team asked to see the woman, and he said, "I've been studying your case and I've been following it very closely. I have a theory, it's never been done, and it certainly is unproven, but I believe that if we draw the blood out of your head, and the surgeon goes in and acts quickly enough, you can't bleed because there'll be no blood in your head. If he moves quickly enough, I believe he can close you up, we could put the blood back in, and I believe we could save your life." In any case, she consulted with other medical professionals, she consulted with her clergy. There was no alternative, so she agreed to undergo the operation. Now, here was the difficulty. There could be no bleeding. They put tape over her eyes, special probes in her ears, and put her under anesthetic and put her body in a bath of ice. They had to lower the core temperatures as much as they could and still hopefully resuscitate her. When she was all the way deep under, the surgeon went in, drew the blood out of her head. He opened up her scalp, found the bleeding area, cauterized it, closed her back up. They took her out of the bath of ice, put the blood back into her head, and amazingly, she survived. A few hours after the operation, she regained consciousness, and she's sort of acclimating. The surgeon walks in to visit her, and when the surgeon walks in, she starts laughing. "Doctor, oh, when you were operating on me, I had the strangest hallucination. I dreamt that I popped out of my body, and I was hovering at the ceiling." Now, the surgeon started listening very carefully because the surgeon had been involved in a number of near-death experiences already. And she said, "And that was the funniest part. I was up there at the ceiling, up there, and I was watching it, and you took an electric toothbrush. You took an electric toothbrush, and you tried to put it into my thigh, and it didn't fit. And so you turned to the nurse next to you, and you said, 'It doesn't fit.' The nurse said, 'Try again.' You tried a second time, and you said, 'It doesn't fit.' The nurse said, 'Try again.' You tried a third time, and finally it fit." Doctor, isn't that funny? The doctor didn't laugh. The doctor turned white. Because part of the procedure involved taking a medical instrument that from a distance could look like an electric toothbrush. He needed to insert it into a vein in her thigh, but the vein was occluded. It was too small. He tried to put it in, and he turned to the surgical nurse next to him and said, "It doesn't fit." She said, "Try again." He tried a second time. He said, "It doesn't fit." The nurse said, "Try again." He tried a third time, and it fit. The problem was that conversation between doctor and nurse was held while the woman's body was in a bath of ice. She was blue in the face. You could have screamed at her. You could have yelled at her. She wasn't there. Yet she vividly recalled and told over step by step, detail by detail. And when you begin reading thousands upon thousands of such cases, you begin to get it. I'm not the body. I'm the guy inside. I'm the one housed in this body. And then you begin to understand life. Hashem created us for one reason, to grow and accomplish. Hashem gave us the Torah, which is the ultimate spiritual nourishment. Hashem gave us the mitzvahs, which are exactly that, the exercises of spiritual growth. Hashem put us on this planet and said, grow, accomplish. You'll be tested. You're given a role to play. And when you've done your job, you're asked one single question. How much of the great human being that you could have been did you become? What Rabbi Elazar bar Padas was told by Hashem was, this is your life setting. You're but an actor on the stage of life. When an actor is given a role to play, he doesn't ask, is that role a successful person, a failure, an intelligent person, a dumb person? And the actor is given a role to play, and the actor is judged on one criteria: how well did you play your part? And that understanding, Hashem was saying to Rabbi Elazar bar Padas, poverty is designed for you. For whatever reason, that's the situation you need to reach your greatness, to reach the pinnacle of height that you can reach. And I believe that's what Hashem was saying to Rabbi Elazar bar Padas. Each of us were given a life setting, handcrafted, the talents, the abilities, and the people who surround us, our temperament, our nature, our dispositions. One person has a fierce temper, another person has insecurities, and one person has a real healthy dose of arrogance, and another person has obsessive thoughts. And each of them don't matter. No one's asked what your setting in this life was. We're asked one question: how well did you perform your part? How well did you play? And that understanding allows us to understand life. There's a gym and there's a spa, each with its plan, each with its purpose. Before I was put into this world, I was under Hashem's throne of glory, like that football player who finds himself put into the body of that rich tycoon. I was put into this body. I didn't choose my intelligence. I didn't choose my level of talents or abilities. I was put into this talent and told, go out there, ford those streams, climb those mountains, become great. And when you've done your job, you'll be asked one question: how much of you did you become? And when you understand that, you fundamentally understand life. And if you don't understand that, nothing under the sun makes sense. Now, if you're curious as to what that 80-year-old man said, I'd like to share with you what he said. When I was on this side of the lectern, and the 80-year-old man said, according to what you've just said, I've wasted my entire life. And I said to him, what do you mean? He said, well, since I'm a little fellow, all I've been focused on is making money, and I've done very well. But that which you're describing, that we're putting out to grow and accomplish, that every exchange with another human being shapes me into who I'll be. My words, my actions, my thoughts make me for eternity. I never thought about that. And according to what you're saying, I wasted my entire life. Now, what do you say to an 80-year-old when he says that? So you say those words, listen, there's still time, you never know what a person can accomplish in a moment. But here's the observation. What if that man woke up at 60? What if he woke up at 40 and said, wait a minute, I get it. Hashem created the heavens and the earth, right? Hashem made the sun, the moon, the planet, the trees. Yeah, I get it. Hashem made everything. Wait a minute. That means Hashem made me. Hey, maybe Hashem made me for a purpose. Yeah, maybe there's a reason. Maybe Hashem put me on a planet for some reason. Oh, wow. Could you imagine if he asked himself that question at 40 years of age, what different life choices he would have made? Now, it's true. If you discover this great secret at 80, there's still time and you can still accomplish. But it's a whole lot better to discover it when you're younger and you could accomplish a lot more. But here's the interesting part of the story. This was an Orthodox shul, and he was an Orthodox man, and he put on tefillin every day and kept Shabbos. But the biggest question of existence, why did Hashem create us? What are we doing here? And what's the purpose of life? He never asked. And if you don't ask this question, you could wander about this thing called life for decades, from this to that, and running and doing and busy and busier than busy, and not even have a clue what you're living for. Hashem created us to be great. Hashem created us with so much potential. Hashem gave us a Torah that is the directive exactly how to grow. It's the spiritual nourishment that gives us the strength to change. And the mitzvahs are each one being a separate exercise in spiritual growth. As we approach Shavuos, this is the opportunity to again be makabel the Torah, to receive it and to vigorously take it into my existence, to learn it and to make it a part of me. When you learn, automatically your soul begins to shine. I call the Torah rocket fuel for the soul. It just gives you strength to take off. And then you're able to do the difficult things that it requires to grow, to learn when to keep your mouth closed, when to say the right thing in what way to what person. When you're challenged with those great difficult challenges, when you have the Torah in your soul and have energy, you still have to do the mitzvahs, you have to do the exercises of spiritual growth, but the two together combine to give the person a chance to grow, to accomplish, to be the great person you can be. And I'd like to close with one last observation. When the Chachamim walked in, when the sages walked in, and Rabbi Elazar bar Padas was unconscious, they witnessed three things. First, he began crying, then he began laughing, then a beam of light came out of his head. Now, why he laughed, I understand. If you were just told that your world to come is in a state that's so wide and so vast that there are 13 rivers running through it, you'd also find it very entertaining. The laughing, I understand. The beam of light, I also understand. When Hashem said to him, 13 rivers, and he said, that's all? And Hashem said, what do you mean? Give me those portions of those who didn't earn it. And what he was exhibiting was dramatic reaching for the heights, aspiring for greatness. And what he was doing was demonstrating something that we human beings fail to understand. As great as you think you can be, Hashem gave us more potential, and more potential than that. Hashem did not create a single human being for mediocrity. Hashem put us on a planet to grow, to accomplish well beyond anything we could imagine. And as great as Rabbi Elazar bar Padas was, he aspired for more. He had more within him. And Hashem said, Giri bach touche. Hashem touched him on the forehead because he said, you got it right. I created you for greatness, and as great as you are, there's more to go. Touche, you got it right. So the laughing, I understand. The beam of light, I understand. But why did he cry? So if you look in Rashi in that Gemara, Rashi says why he cried. Do you remember when he said to Hashem, did I live half of my years? If I didn't pass the halfway mark, I don't know if I have the fortitude. I don't know if I have the strength to continue. And Hashem said, yes, you passed the halfway mark. And Cain, if so, put me back in life. Says Rashi, when Hashem said to him, you passed the halfway mark, oy vey, half of my life is gone. Woo! He starts crying. Half of my life is gone. He starts crying. That Rashi is very, very perplexing. This man is living an austere, difficult life. The chikel milsatuva, poverty, illness, disease. He's living Gehenna. And he's halfway done. Hashem just gave him the greatest news. Half of my Gehenna is gone. Wow, he should be dancing a jig. It's like, imagine a man running a marathon. And at mile 20, the judge says to him, keep it up, you're setting a world-class record. Ay vey, 20 miles gone. You wouldn't cry, you'd dance a jig. And why is Rabbi Elazar bar Padas crying? Because half his life is gone. He should be overjoyed. Half of the thing called Gehenna is gone. Would you like to understand the answer to this question? I believe the answer is quite profound. You see, when Rabbi Elazar bar Padas opened his eyes in the morning, he understood life. He opened his eyes and said, let's go, 24 hours to change myself and change the people around me, let's go. And because he understood life, he loved life. There was a lust for life. Life was the most precious commodity in existence because he understood the purpose of life. And even though there was pain, and even though there was deprivation, and even though he had it pretty darn rough, he loved life. And if you want to learn a little Musar, I think that is the message. If you find a human being who suffers, and I mean real suffering, I mean really has it rough, I guarantee they didn't have it half as rough as did Rabbi Elazar bar Padas. But despite that, there was such a love of life. But why? Because he fundamentally understood the purpose of life, he understood the opportunity of growth, and he woke up in the morning and said, let's go. When Hashem said to him, half of your life is gone, oy vey, the most precious commodity I have, half of my life is gone, he began crying. And I believe that message is profound. Hashem wants us success. Hashem created us because Hashem's the giver. Hashem put us into this world to grow and accomplish. Hashem custom made, handcrafted the ideal stage setting for each of us. And Hashem gave us the Torah, the spiritual nourishment, and the mitzvahs to grow with, because Hashem wants us to succeed, to be what? To be that great person that you can be. Not to be him, not to be her, not to be anyone else, but to be the great person you could be. May Hashem grant us the wisdom and understanding to put this into practice. I want to thank again the yeshiva for inviting me. Rabbi Moskowitz, thank you for introducing me. I wish you all much, much hatzlacha, a beautiful Kabbalah Torah, and a wonderful Yom Tov.